Follow the money. It always leads somewhere they didn't want you to look.
In the summer of 1950, Detroit was humming with the rhythm of a city at its zenith. The clatter of assembly lines echoed across vast factory floors, where workers, clad in oil-stained overalls, crafted the automobiles that would define a nation. The city's population had soared past 1.8 million, making it the fourth largest in the United States. But in a little over 6 decades, Detroit would file the largest municipal bankruptcy in US history, staggering under $18 to $20 billion in debt. Back then, Detroit was the undisputed heart of the American automotive industry. The Big Three, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, were not just companies, they were dynasties, employing hundreds of thousands and pulling people from every corner of the country to the promise of steady work. At the Highland Park plant, the grand symbol of Ford's manufacturing prowess, nearly 100,000 men and women labored day and night. Their efforts fueled the post-war boom, and their wages supported entire communities. Woodward Avenue, known as Detroit's Main Street, pulsed with energy. Neon lights illuminated the bustling thoroughfare, where people flocked to theaters, shops, and restaurants. Cadillac Square was alive with the chatter of businessmen in sharp suits, their briefcases swinging in sync with their hurried steps. Life was good, and hope was boundless. The city's wealth was reflected in its skyline, an impressive array of Art Deco marvels that stood as monuments to prosperity. The Fisher Building, with its golden tower reaching high into the sky, symbolized more than architectural grandeur. It was a beacon of opportunity. Detroit's public schools, among the finest in the nation, were filled with children whose parents dreamed of a brighter future, one of progress and prosperity. Beneath this veneer of success, though, the seeds of future challenges were quietly taking root. The first glimmers of trouble appeared in the late 1950s. Suburbanization was beginning to lure residents away from the city core, drawn by the allure of new homes and quieter streets. By the early 60s, this migration was more than a trickle. It was the start of an exodus that would drain the lifeblood of the city. Automakers, too, began shifting parts of their operations to other states and even overseas, in search of cheaper labor and friendlier tax climates. Such changes were subtle at first, like a vehicle's engine slowly losing its purr. But these small, seemingly insignificant shifts were the precursors to deeper, more systemic issues. Yet in 1950, few could predict the magnitude of the coming transformation. Detroit's residents lived in the present, wrapped in a bubble of optimism, fueled by the belief that the Motor City's engine could run forever. In the theaters and diners along Grand River Avenue, conversation was abundant, and laughter came easily. But beneath the laughter, a city was beginning to change. It was a change imperceptible to most, like the slow erosion of rock beneath the relentless tide. And though the surface seemed as vibrant as ever, the echoes of those changes would soon reverberate far beyond the city limits. As the 1960s unfolded, Detroit's optimism was gradually overshadowed by a series of decisions that would set the stage for its disintegration. The city's leadership, faced with mounting challenges, often chose short-term solutions over sustainable strategies. They failed to address the growing racial tensions and economic disparities that simmered beneath the surface. The riots of 1967, which erupted in the midst of this turbulent era, marked a turning point. Sparked by a police raid in a predominantly African-American neighborhood, the unrest left 43 dead, over 1,400 buildings burned, and thousands arrested. Governor George Romney sent in the National Guard, and President Lyndon B. Johnson deployed federal troops to restore order. The scars of those 5 days ran deep, accelerating white flight and deepening the divide between Detroit's communities. This exodus was a significant blow to the city's tax base, further eroding its financial stability. As the population dwindled, so did the demand for housing, leading to widespread abandonment. Entire neighborhoods were left in decay, with vacant homes becoming symbols of the city's decline. The local government, under mayors like Coleman Young, struggled to balance the budget with a shrinking revenue pool. Young, elected in 1973 as Detroit's first African-American mayor, faced enormous pressure to revitalize the city. His tenure was marked by ambitious projects, yet he was often criticized for his inability to bridge the racial divide and for his contentious relationship with suburban communities. Meanwhile, the auto industry was undergoing its own transformation. Foreign competition was intensifying, with Japanese automakers like Toyota and Honda capturing significant market share. Detroit's Big Three faced declining sales and profits, leading to massive layoffs. In 1979, Chrysler received a $1.5 billion bailout from the federal government to stave off bankruptcy. This momentarily stabilized the industry, but it was a band-aid on a deeper wound. The auto sector no longer provided the robust employment opportunities it once did, leaving many Detroiters without jobs. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, attempts to diversify the economy met with limited success. The Renaissance Center, a gleaming tower complex intended to rejuvenate Detroit's business district, became a fortress-like symbol of isolation rather than integration. The promises of new jobs and investment often failed to materialize to the extent needed. Simultaneously, infrastructure crumbled as funds were diverted to other urgent needs. The Detroit public schools, starved of resources, saw plummeting graduation rates, with only 25% of students graduating on time by the late 1990s. In the halls of power, financial mismanagement compounded these woes. Detroit's pension obligations soared, reflecting promises made during more prosperous times. By 2005, the city faced a pension shortfall of $1.6 billion. Leaders like Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick, who took office in 2002, inherited a city on the brink. Kilpatrick's administration was marred by scandal and corruption, culminating in his conviction on multiple felony charges, including racketeering and bribery. This betrayal of public trust only deepened the city's woes. The decisions made by city officials often seemed disconnected from the reality on the ground. In the mid-2000s, Detroit invested heavily in downtown revitalization projects, yet these efforts did little to address the systemic issues plaguing the neighborhoods. The city's debt continued to balloon, reaching unsustainable levels. By 2012, Detroit's deficit had grown to $327 million, with liabilities far exceeding assets. Emergency manager Kevin Orr, appointed by the state in 2013, was tasked with restoring financial order. But the magnitude of the problem was staggering. Local governance was not the only factor. State and federal policies also played a role in Detroit's decline. The shifting of manufacturing jobs overseas, coupled with trade agreements like NAFTA, accelerated the loss of industry. The city, once a hub of innovation and labor, now found itself increasingly marginalized in a globalized economy. By 2013, Detroit was a shadow of its former self. The population had plummeted to under 700,000. Entire blocks were left to nature, with over 78,000 abandoned buildings dotting the landscape. The once majestic Michigan Central Station stood as a haunting reminder of what was lost. But even as the city grappled with these challenges, the worst was still ahead. The financial precipice loomed ever closer, and the devastating ramifications of decades of mismanagement and neglect were about to come crashing down. On the morning of July 18, 2013, the air in Detroit was thick with anticipation. A city on edge, awaiting its fate. It was a typical hot summer day, but the heat was the least of the city's concerns. Inside the Coleman A. Young Municipal Center, a somber mood pervaded the halls. Kevin Orr, Detroit's emergency manager, had a formidable task ahead of him. The clock ticked towards a decision that would mark an unprecedented chapter in American history. By mid-morning, at 10 a.m., Orr convened with city officials behind closed doors. The discussion was weighty, the options grim. After reviewing the city's dire financial state, crushing under $18 to $20 billion in debt, there was little room for debate. Bankruptcy was not merely a possibility, It was an inevitability. The announcement was set to be made public soon, but the magnitude of what lay ahead was still difficult to grasp. As the meeting adjourned, Orr's face was lined with the burden of his responsibility. At 11:45 a.m., he walked to a podium, facing a room filled with reporters and city employees. Cameras clicked incessantly, capturing the moment Detroit would officially become the largest U.S. city to declare bankruptcy. Orr cleared his throat and began, confirming what many had feared. The city was unable to meet its financial obligations, and bankruptcy proceedings were necessary to move forward. The news ricocheted through the city like an electric shock. By noon, the announcement had reached the streets, where residents listened in disbelief. At a local diner on the east side, regular patrons sat in silence, forks poised mid-air as the gravity of the situation sank in. Conversations were hushed, punctuated by the occasional muttered expletive or shake of the head. Outside, in the oppressive summer heat, city workers milled about, unsure of what this meant for their jobs. Security guards, clerks, road maintenance crews, all faced an uncertain future. Detroit's unions, representing thousands of these workers, braced for the impact. The city's pensioners, many of whom had dedicated their lives to Detroit's service, feared for their retirement security. By early afternoon, the news had spread nationwide. Financial analysts dissected the announcement, and television screens across the country flashed with the headlines. In Washington, D.C., policymakers debated the broader implications. Could other cities face a similar fate? What would this mean for municipal bonds across the nation? The ripple effect of Detroit's collapse was already being felt beyond Michigan's borders. At 2 p.m., the city's mayor, Dave Bing, held his own press conference. Though his term was marked by efforts to navigate the city's challenges, the reality had outpaced any political maneuvering. Bing urged calm and promised that the city would continue to provide essential services, though everyone knew they would need to operate with far fewer resources. As the day wore on, Detroiters gathered to discuss the situation. At a community center near 8 Mile Road, residents voiced their frustration and fears. "What happens to us now?" an elderly woman asked, her voice trembling. The answers were few and far between, with uncertainty hanging in the air like a dense fog. By 5 p.m., Kevin Orr filed the Chapter 9 bankruptcy paperwork in federal court, a step that was both necessary and deeply painful. This move was intended to provide the breathing room needed to restructure Detroit's crippling debt and liabilities, but it also meant painful cuts and restructuring were inevitable. Negotiations with creditors, unions, and pensioners would soon follow, a daunting task that promised to be contentious and fraught with emotion. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the city, Detroit's skyline seemed to embody its plight. Beautiful, yet beleaguered. The Renaissance Center loomed over the waterfront, a symbol of past dreams and future uncertainty. By nightfall, the city was quieter than usual, as if collectively holding its breath, waiting for what was to come next. But the day had been set in history, a defining moment not just for Detroit, but for the many who had called it home. The Motor City had reached a crossroads, its future uncertain, but its spirit still unbroken. The aftermath of Detroit's bankruptcy filing was a landscape altered, both physically and psychologically. For the city's 20,000 municipal workers and retirees, the uncertainty of the future became an immediate and pressing concern. Salaries were slashed, benefits renegotiated, and pensions restructured, leading to a profound sense of betrayal among those who had spent their lives dedicated to serving the city. The once reliable safety net of public service now seemed like a frayed rope. In the neighborhoods, the impact was palpable. Services that Detroiters had long taken for granted were cut back drastically. Streetlights flickered and went dark, garbage piled higher as collections grew infrequent, and police response times stretched longer and longer. Residents felt the sting of neglect as their cities struggled to keep up with even basic municipal duties. Schools, already starved of resources, faced further budget cuts, pushing educational opportunities further out of reach for many children. For retirees, the blow was especially harsh. Many had counted on their pensions to provide a stable, if modest, income in their later years. The restructuring meant that some saw reductions of up to 20% in their monthly checks. The emotional toll was visible in community centres where retirees gathered, their conversations tinged with anxiety about making ends meet. Each meeting became a space of shared grief and resilience, where stories of sacrifice and loss circulated like currency. Beyond the personal pain, Detroit's bankruptcy redefined the city's landscape. Efforts to demolish the thousands of vacant houses and tackle blight moved forward, yet the problem seemed Sisyphean in scale.
Some areas saw revitalization with new investment, as investors and developers bought up cheap property, hoping to ride a wave of renewal. Yet for many long-time residents, the changes felt disconnected from their realities. They watched as their city transformed, uncertain if there would be a place for them in its future. The cultural fabric of Detroit, however, remained resilient. Music, art, and community spirit surged anew, as grassroots movements sparked pockets of renewal across the city. The creative energy that had always defined Detroit. Even in the face of immense challenges, Detroit's bankruptcy was a watershed moment, a time when the city confronted its past and charted a new course into the unknown. It was a reminder to America of the fragility of prosperity and the enduring strength of community. For those who lived through it, the lessons were clear. Cities are built not just by industry, but by the people who call them home. In the end, Detroit's story was one not only of loss, but of a gritty determination to rise once more.